Cool, cool. Welcome, everybody. We'll let everybody get a chance to come in. People are grabbing their lunch, grabbing a fresh cup of coffee. Only half a day left for my office people if you're on the East Coast.
That's right.
Almost there. I got some cool plans tonight. I'm going into Lancaster. There is it's a show called Beautifica, and it's in a planetarium. And
Oh,
they show like a really cool visual experience with music, and it was an impulsive thing. I signed up for it and thought this just sounds good. I'll go with it.
I love that. I love that.
All right, people are coming in, yay. Cool, cool.
And while you're getting settled, let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. Greetings from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania today, where it is cloudy and rainy.
And 48, even though yesterday it was 70.
Wow.
We're
Yeah,
in that shoulder month.
we don't know what we're wearing to go outside anymore. Hey, Carolyn from Wilmington.
Oh,
I was just in Wilmington, did a comedy show for 440 people at the Hotel DuPont.
oh,
Whoa.
fancy. I'm
I
originally from Delaware, so I'm familiar with Wilmington. Michelle is joining from Vermont, where it is 30 degrees, so she has our temperature beat.
Very, very cool. All right, it's a couple minutes after noon. We'll continue to welcome people as they arrive, but welcome to another exciting edition of Meet the Author at the Pyramid Club on Zoom. So, my friends from the Pyramid Club, welcome, welcome. My friends from all over, welcome, welcome. And I am excited for our program today. Before we get started, I want to just give you some upcoming events. April 10th. Angie Callan has a book called Scary Good. Scary Good. And it's a book about, first of all, she is a tremendous career coach. And it's really about owning your career, which you know is a passion of mine. So I love that. So Angie Callan, April 10th. We've got a women's author panel, semi-annual. We do one in the spring, we do one in the fall. So we will have that June 25th. The registration is not up yet, but it will be up soon. July 24th, we have Bruce Tolgan. Bruce Tolgan has been around a while. Back in the day, David, have you heard of Bruce Tolgan?
I have. I have.
Yeah, he back in the day he was like the Gen X guy. Back when Gen X was the problem. And then
Mhm.
then it was Gen Y
Yeah.
and now it's Gen Z. So, but I think of him as the Gen X guy, but he's written at least 10 books and he is going to be with us on July 24th. And let me look because I think I added a couple more notes. Oh, yes, April 17th. This is a bonus. I have a comedy show at the Pyramid Club. So if anybody's in Philadelphia on April
Oh, wow.
17th, Friday night, I will be with Mr. Joey Callahan, who is a very funny Irishman that I've worked with many times. So if you're in the Philly area, April 17th for that. So I want to introduce our chat room ambassador and my co-producer, Lysandra Cheatham. Lysandra, tell us about you.
Good morning. Greetings, everyone. Happy Friday, everyone. My name is Lysandra Cheatham, and I am so excited to be here and share this experience with you. I will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions or thoughts, insights you want to share with the group, put them in there. I'll make sure that they are brought up so that we can unpack them. And I'm excited to just have this experience with you. Welcome.
Always good to have you, Lysandra, my partner in crime. And I think we're ready to begin. This is it. We're getting
Right.
started. So, anybody who has participated in this before, I never read the author's bio. I always share, how did I find this guy, right? So, David and I had the blessing of participating in a year-long, pretty hardcore program at Wharton to get a certificate as Chief Human Resource Officers. And I have to be honest, I fell into it kind of on a whim, which doesn't sound like a kind of a whim thing, but I honestly thought I applied and I thought, oh, they probably won't take me. They probably won't. But they did. And then I had to pay for it. And that was crazy. But in that program, I met many wonderful people and we have stayed in touch. There's probably a good posse of about 25 of us
Yep. Yep.
that we've stayed in touch. Maybe there were 89 to start out with, but a good third of us have stayed in touch. But that is where I met David. And I knew I loved him for many reasons. One, he was always so insightful in our group participation and just so smart. But the thing that really touched my heart is at our graduation, I put out an invitation and I said, listen, anybody who wants to go to the Pyramid Club, it's a private business club in Center City. It's beautiful, 52nd floor. You can come. And I had one person take me up on it. And it was our author today, David Pettrone Swalve, who I am so proud of because I know what it takes to get a book out. His book is out, Pirate Jokes Aren't Funny, a powerful blueprint for authentic leadership. So he and I share a passion. So, David, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, T. I really appreciate being here today. It's exciting to be able to, one, be on a podcast with a friend, but two, to be able to talk about, I'll call it one of the more important aspects of leadership right now in the quantum workforce era. So thank you for having me on the podcast today, Teresa.
Oh my gosh. Well, I don't even know where to begin, but I'm going to begin with let's just talk about the name of the book first of all, because I remember when you first mentioned it, I was like, where is he going with this? So pirate jokes aren't funny. What's the story?
Well, a manager stopped me mid-session one time in the middle of a presentation and told me 4 words: pirate jokes aren't funny. I'd been opening corporate workshops for years, music playing in the background as people walked in, a little Duke Ellington, a little Eminem, a little Detta. Then I would use pirate jokes to break the ice. And my Blackbeard pirate joke, I would use voices and gestures, and it worked great until it didn't. And she was right. I was using humor as armor. Growing up as an adoptee in a multicultural family in rural Iowa, I often found myself as the person of color in the rooms I was in. So I learned early on how to fit in however I could. On weekends, I'd watch WGN pirate movies, Captain Blood, Long John Silver, and yeah, they were outlaws, but they built their own systems when the conventional ones had no place for them. So pirate jokes were my way of sneaking authenticity in the room that weren't really built
Ah,
for me. It was a
okay.
brilliant disguise, Teresa, but it outlived its purpose, right? I think that what it did, it cracked open for me this is that leaders experience this constantly, right? We build our identity, we perform around that role, then something shifts. And the question isn't what I do next, it's really who am I when nobody's watching? So that's
Ooh,
a tactics problem and a leadership identity crisis. So she broke it open for me. And what I found is if my leadership only works when things are stable, well, it's already broken. So that was the origin of the title.
very cool. Well, now I know. Now I understand. And by the way, I thought this was cool because David sent me his book, and in the book is a bat. And I thought, oh my gosh, how awesome. So, what is your day job, David? So, you're president of Authentera. Tell us about the work that you do?
Yeah, well, we're a leadership translation organization, right? We help organizations close that gap between the say and the do ratio. So many individuals as leaders are in that performance. And well, let's just face it, when you're performing as a leader, you don't have strong followership. And without strong followership, you certainly don't get the outcomes that all organizations are looking for:
Right.
productivity, efficiency, innovation, all those wonderful things. So what I found is that as I look back on the successes, and I'll call it the different stages of my success, that one of the key things to it was the more authentic I became, the more successful I became.
Mm,
So, ultimately, 3 years ago, I started thinking about how is it that I could build structures and systems to be able to help organizations develop leaders to close that gap between their say and their do. So I spent a long time, Teresa, researching the real, if you will, stuff about authentic leadership. And what I found was that it had been researched and so much that no one was really taking the time to compile it. So we compiled it, and what we found is that we can assess, we can develop, and we can then nurture individuals to that more authentic area that gives them those outcomes that they're looking for that they've been missing. And so that's what our organization does. We help organizations translate between the say and the do and close that gap.
cool. And you do like workshops,
Yeah.
coaching.
Yeah, we do. We have, there's a variety of product tools that we have. We have a full ecosystem. We have an assessment that measures your competence and your confidence in the different components of authentic leadership. We give workshops, right? We have micro sessions that focus on individual components, behaviors, and attributes. And we also built, Teresa, a 12-week certification that we have a cohort starting this summer. But the 12-week certification actually walks you in depth through all of those 8 components that we talk about. And more importantly, during that time, we ask our participants to bring real world projects with them, policies, procedures, programs, practices, and programs that allow them to be able to change and influence their organizational culture. And then finally, yes, we provide coaching, individual coaching for individuals who have either gone through the certification or have contracted with us to be able to help their organization grow and deliver higher efficiencies.
Cool. Cool stuff. Cool stuff. Now let's talk about you growing up. Let's
Okay,
talk about you. Because I think it's very interesting. You grew up in the Midwest.
I did.
You you went to West Point.
I
And I
did.
actually got to meet some of your West Point friends
Yep.
because we've had some Zoom calls together.
Yep.
Um, tell us about that and what that felt like for you.
Well, you mentioned it growing up, in rural Iowa. And as I mentioned, I'm an adoptee and I started out in foster. I started out as a foster kid and actually there's a whole story there, right? Which I think has influenced my desire to be able to give people the chance to be authentic because my foster parents wanted to adopt me and they couldn't. The state of Iowa told them that they couldn't adopt me because I had a different colored eyes than they had, right?
Wow.
This is our lifetime, right? And so they literally had to fight it. And so right before I turned 3 and they won, right? They were able to adopt me. And so I grew up as, I said the person of color in virtually every room, church, school, sports. And I learned early on that fitting in meant I had to code switch all the time.
Wow.
And you develop a navigation system when the conventional map doesn't work for you, or there's somebody who can't necessarily teach you how to navigate. And that's kind of how it was for me. I had to learn how to read rooms because the rooms weren't built for me. I had to find footing because there wasn't a clear path. And then I got to West Point. You talk about, that, right? And I remember a moment like second semester plebe year, I was an upperclassman stopped me in the stairwell right before evening study hours, and I was pinging, right? You have to put your arms at a 90-degree angle and hug the wall and ping up the stairs. Your eyes are forward, your back is straight, and I'm pinging up the stairs and I hear a cadet stop, and here I am in this hallway or this stairway, fluorescent lights just making me feel starkly exposed. And this firstie, who was kind of known for fire, this firstie is a senior. He walks down a couple more steps, stands in front of me, and he says, yeah, Cadet Swalve, do you have any reggae music? And Teresa, again, I'm 18 years old, and I froze. I mean, at this point, my mind's going 1,000 miles per hour. Was this a trap? Is it a test? Am I supposed to really know what reggae music is? And so, but
What
I did.
relevance does this
That
have
that's
to
right. That's right.
everything?
That's it. I didn't know. I'm gonna be honest. I didn't know what reggae music was. I'm from Iowa, man. And I
You guys
think
are
there
not jamming to Bob Marley out
not
there.
not at that point.
No.
Not out in the cornfields. And I didn't know. And looking back on it, I'm going to assume, he thought I knew what reggae was because of the way I looked, right? And I think about that from time to time. But I saw his hesitation, and he explained right there. He said, "Hey, man, reggae has Jamaican origins." He starts telling me about reggae. He's this, 6'4". He has the inherited traits of leadership. I'll say it that way, right?
Okay.
And next thing you know, he told me about, to your point, Bob Marley and Peter Tosh, and he told me I should go listen to it. And literally that weekend, I went to the cadet store, and I bought the Legend CD, and I played it in my barracks probably nonstop for 4 days. I spent so much energy listening to it. But what I'd really learned from this moment is I'd spent so much of my time fitting into a colorless world that I'd never explored the parts of my identity that didn't fit the mold. You see, that moment didn't give me belonging, Teresa, but that connection between growing up as an other and getting to West Point and being an other where there's form, fit, and uniform, right? That moment gave me permission to stop performing sameness and start exploring who I really was. So I started asking myself questions. Here I am, 18, 19 years old. I started to ask myself questions that I'd never let myself ask, like, what about my heritage? About the parts of my identity I'd been trained to minimize? What if it's going to feel like if I don't perform and actually show up myself? The navigation system I'd been preparing for my whole life, reading rooms, finding footing where there's no map. I realized that wasn't a deficit, that was a capacity. So the thing I'd been trying to hide from at West Point started to become clear to me, that being an other, and that's what I'd say we all are at this point, isn't the
Mm-hmm.
problem. Performing like you're not is the problem, right? So I think
Wow.
that was a transition from my youth to West Point when I think about some of those moments.
Wow. So much to unpack. It's weird because I think growing up, we're really taught to fit in,
Yeah, yeah,
that like we're groomed to fit in. And it's not that you want to be, and I remember I went through a punk phase, believe it or
yeah,
not. I'll send you a picture. I went through a punk phase with like the mohawk and all the cra so you have your moments of just not, but finding that balance
yeah.
of fitting into a point that makes sense and being who you authentically are. So that's really what you're teaching people
Yeah,
is
that's it. That's it. What we're trying to be able to do is give people a framework and tools so that they can practice. We've spent so much time practicing being fake and performing,
yes.
and we haven't given ourselves the permission and the time. And again, the research is out there that helps us understand what are the attributes of great authentic leaders, what are the behaviors of great authentic leaders. And when we codified them, what we found was that we can learn them, right? And we can I call it addition by subtraction, Teresa. Everyone's like, I don't want to have to learn another framework. I don't want to have to do the work. And I say, that's not what it is. This is addition by subtraction. You learn how to take the mask off. You learn how to remove the costume. You learn how to
Yeah.
be able to show up as yourself, not with confidence, but with truth. And so that's what we're trying to be able to do on our side of the table.
David, who's an authentic leader? Because you know what helps me when if I can see what good looks like,
Yeah.
even without a model,
Yeah.
that's helpful. Who's on your list of authentic leaders that we might know?
Well, you're pulling into chapter 11 and chapter 12 of, modern day pirates, but the story I like to tell, right, is about Patagonia, right? I mean, the reality is that if you look back, I can't remember how many years it is, but they had the ad campaign in the New York Times that said, "Don't buy this jacket." And it went on to explain in the New York Times article underneath this ad of "Don't buy this jacket" why it is that they wanted people not to just be a consumer.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that the tricky part was that ad drove sales
Oh,
through the roof,
yes.
right? Right, right,
Brilliant.
right, right. But at the end of the day, it really was an attempt to be authentic. And as you know, their founder and CEO ultimately decided that what we're going to do is we're going to become a public good organization, and they transform the way that they use profit, and they transform the way in which that they as an organization are driving their role in society. So just, as an organization wide, Patagonia is one of them. But in chapter 11, I've got, I don't know, 13, 14 different pirates that you can take modern day pirates that you can take a look at and what they've done in modern era to be able to get there. And here's the thing I would argue, Teresa, to your point, back to the fit in, I think everyone's a pirate. Everyone is an other right now, right? Everyone's dealing with their multiple identities and
Yeah.
their code switching, all the things that I had to learn as a youth. Now, even the one who has the inherited leadership look is finding their old playbook doesn't work as well. So, what I would say is that twofold. There's great examples in the book of great pirates. Patagonia is a great organizational example, but even beyond that, take a moment, pause, and look around you, and you'll see the people who are authentic because authenticity is a discipline, not a feeling.
Yes. Yes. Well, you have and I'm an OD person too, so
Yep,
we
yep,
we
yep.
we love our models. We love well because it helps the framework helps us to see it and impart it to others. So tell me about you've got 8 parts to your blueprint.
Yeah.
Help us understand that.
Yeah, there are really 8 leadership capacities divided into identity work and action work. And the identity work has to come first, and that's the 4 attributes that define who you are. And it starts with inner clarity, that's knowing who you are when nobody's watching. It moves into trust built transparency, that's saying what you'll do, doing what you said, and acknowledging when you can't. Then there's equitable insight. That's understanding how identity shapes perception. And then ultimately, on the attribute side, there's guiding principles, which is really defining your non-negotiables. I talk about it a lot when I do the walk the plank song because we have music and playlists for each of these because they're neurological anchors to help people remember how it feels to demonstrate inner clarity, how it feels to stand up for the right thing, right? So I do this exercise where I say walk the plank and think about what your non-negotiables are when you stood up for something. And so the guiding principles is the
Mm,
fourth and probably the final pillar of the identity work, and that's who you are. Then there's the action work, which takes even more practice, I think. It starts with activated growth, building the learning capacity through failures, acknowledging successes. Then it moves into compassionate leadership, which is leading with both humanity and standards, right? Then it walks through us through a framework around how authentic dialogue allows us to communicate with coherence to be able to ensure that people can listen and not just hear. And the final piece of the action work, Teresa, is aligned execution, which is delivering on commitments that reinforce the values and behaviors you're expecting to see. So you got to do the identity work before you do the action work. And a lot of people
yes.
get that wrong. They go right into tell me what I'm supposed to do, but the
Great.
order matters
Yes.
because if you don't if you don't if you do it the way that traditional leadership development works with the action work, here's how to give feedback, here's how to delegate, that's backwards. You ultimately don't know how and why you're doing that. You can't communicate authentically until you know who you are. You can't build
Absolutely.
trust
It's the
until
key.
you define what being transparent is. You got to do the identity work. So the book is broken into then those 2 sets of it, right? The framework then walks you through the attributes, walks you through the behaviors. And yeah, we're both learners, Teresa. And at the end of each chapter, what I do is I ask the reader to do a 5-day practice, put it into practice. So start small, right? Do some reflection thinking, find a confidant, work with that confidant to put some practice into it. And then ultimately by that 5th day, right, put your toe in the water, take it with you into the Tuesday meeting to make it happen. But all 8 components are important and all 8 need practice going forward. So that's the framework, and it was just based upon the research that's out there. There's so much research on authentic leadership, and
Sure.
so many people want to dilute it by just saying, well, I'm authentic, and therefore it's okay for me to be
Mm,
biased. I'm authentic, therefore it's okay for me to be a jerk. And it's like, no, 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 you're missing the whole definition, right? So that's what part of this book is saying, hey, research is there. We know what authentic means, and you can't tell me just because you want to be whoever you want to be, that means you're
That
authentic.
Right. Oh my gosh, you hit one of my hot buttons.
Uh-oh.
When somebody says, and they behave badly,
Yep.
they acknowledge that they behave badly,
Yeah.
and then they say, but that's just who I am. I'm being authentic. I'm
Yep.
like, oh, nay, nay.
Right.
We are not going to go down that path. We had a little conversation before we opened the doors for folks around people really staying comfortable.
Yeah.
And I struggle with this. I have an easier time moving the needle in an organization when leaders are uncomfortable, right?
Right.
So they're
Right.
feeling pain. I
Yep.
don't know. They're not doing well financially. People are leaving the company. It's easier for me to work with them. But you know what's hard? When they're comfortable.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, because we talked about that, this is a problem. How do we move leaders from embracing comfort? Everybody's embracing comfort. How do we move people? Is it even possible, David?
Well, I when I hear questions like that, Teresa, I often think of, here I am with jokes again. I often think of the joke of how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is pretty easy, right? It's just one, but the light bulb has to want to change.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the trickiest part for us, right? Part of what happens when we put the mask on and we put the costume on is it allows us to stop growing, stop doing the work. And as we talked about before, in the quantum workforce era, everyone is in multiple places at the same time. And if no one's going to challenge them in the workplace, it's easier for us to just be stagnant in the workplace and deal with the
Hmm.
dynamic rest of the world that's around there. But what I found is that the leaders who truly are human centered want to create the environment and the culture that allows their team members and employees to perform their best. And in today's workforce, in the quantum workforce era, that means we have to be able to deal with all of the different dynamics that are happening. And what that requires us to do is not code switch constantly, but show up authentically. So I'm getting a lot of questions from leaders about, well, how do I, show up more authentic? Well, we're going to have to do the practice. You're going to have to do the work. You're going to have to take the mask off. And it's important to take the mask off because when you have the mask on, you really can't see left and right. You can only see through the little slots in the middle of the eye. So I would say that I can't force anyone to to move away from comfort and to actually do the work and do the exercise and eat your vegetables and all those things that we don't really like to do. But what I'm finding is that those true authentic or those true leaders, people who understand that leadership is selfless, they're seeing that there's a need for changing the way in which we lead today, and those are where the questions are coming from. So I'd say I can't convince anybody, but I can certainly provide the tools for them to get there.
Yeah, it's like any change.
Yep.
If they are on board and they want to change, but I really wish I could pull some people out of that comfort zone because I see such potential
I
within
agree.
them. And it pains me. I'm like, oh, you could be so much more. But they're like, but I'm making a ton of money and I don't
Yeah.
have to really sweat. And I'm like,
That's it.
no, come on.
That's it. And that goes back to guiding principles. What is it that we're here on this planet for, right? What are your non-negotiables? If it's only about title and dollars, you're probably not truly a leader. If it's about developing other human beings, then you probably are a leader and you may not put dollars at the highest point in your guiding principles. But I do think that it requires internal reflection to decide if you're that type of leader, what leader you want to be.
Yeah, yeah. Probably one of my favorite quotes. Um, you call leadership today a costume party where the best masks win. It was like a mic drop moment. I'm like, oh, holy crap. Yes, yes. So as someone who's been in Fortune 500 boardrooms, why do smart, capable people keep reaching for the mask? What is the payoff?
I think we're talking about it, right? Let's be honest, because the mask works, right? That's the problem right there. You perform confidence, you get promoted. You perform certainty, you get the offer. You perform belonging, you get access. The system rewards performance in the short term. The cost shows up later when you're exhausted, when the culture doesn't match your values, when you realize you've built a career around a version of yourself that you don't even recognize in the
Yes.
mirror. I watched this senior leader spend 20 years just climbing. I mean, every role you're supposed to have, manager to director, VP, SVP to C-suite. And then she told me one day, I look in the mirror and I don't even recognize myself. I've become something that they needed me to be, but
Yes.
I don't even know who I am. And Teresa, that's a cost. That really is a cost to lose yourself. The quantum workforce era is breaking the system. Digital transparency exposes gaps. Your LinkedIn gets audited before your resume even gives you a chance to talk to them. Misalignments get caught. We mentioned demographic plurality. The changing environment means that you're being evaluated by people like me who detect performance in milliseconds. The payoff for wearing the mask is actually shrinking, and the cost of wearing a mask is escalating. But honestly, we're at that inflection point, and most leaders haven't learned a different way yet.
Wow. Well, I know we've got some friends because I looked at our list of participants. We got some friends who are watching, and I know people who will watch this after we do this live that are from HR and
Yep.
talent development.
Yep.
Um, how do they bear responsibility for building these systems of sameness? And what can they do? Like, what advice do we have for our friends in HR and talent development to be in alignment with your message of authenticity and authentic leadership?
HR bears a massive responsibility, right? We design the systems. We build interview processes that reward performance. We create competency models based on historical success, which means we're selecting people who look like the leaders we've always had. When we say we value diversity as HR people, and then we
Mm,
hire for culture fit, which is just code for fits the mold, that's probably incongruent. Here's what most organizations miss about performance management: the entire system is broken. Annual reviews measure past performance while claiming to develop future capacity. We optimize backward looking metrics instead of forward looking growth. So, part of what we're trying to be able to do at Authentara is we're the blueprint addresses these directly. Instead of asking how did you perform last year, we ask who are you becoming as a leader, what capacity are you building. And what we know is when we get it right as HR professionals, then processes actually test for authenticity, not performance. Multiple interviewers asking the same question
mm,
for different from different angles, looking for consistency. Our competency models should include identity work capacities, not just strategic thinking. It needs inner clarity, equitable insight, trust built transparency. Our development programs need to start with identity, not tactics. Before teaching feedback or meetings, teach them how to reflect on who they are as a leader. And performance management focuses on reducing fatigue, not driving results. And that's not good because leaders are burning out under performance pressure, and you can't sustain excellence. And when our minds turn to reducing fatigue rather than driving results, we're missing the point. But I think the ultimate challenge for us, Teresa, in the HR world is that, dare I say, we move too slowly. The workforce evolves faster than our programs do. We try to cling to things that worked in the past. I would say if we want to change the future, we need to experiment. We need to pilot new programs. I think we need authenticity based development. And I think that we have to be ready to fail fast and keep our eyes open to see what works for us. But we bear a huge responsibility for the situation that we find ourselves in. And I think we also can find our way out of it with the right leadership.
yeah, I there's a question in the chat from my good friend John. How responsible is HR when execs, senior leaders, and the entire culture is toxic?
Yeah.
He agrees HR needs to adapt. And I think some of this, and this was my paper that I wrote for
That's
Wharton
right. I
on
remember
good
this.
HR.
That's right.
So, some of this is we do need leaders to see that HR is a partner and brings thought leadership to it.
Absolutely.
I will push my HR friends to say sometimes, and this is getting out of our comfort zone, we need to skin our knees a little bit
Yeah,
and say things that are not welcome and that are poo-pooed,
that's
but
right.
you stick to it because eventually they see it's coming from your soul. You're
Right.
not doing this to be a pain in the butt. But what advice do you have in those environments? Because I know them where you got
Yeah.
leaders who they're not listening to HR.
Right.
So how can HR help?
Well, first of all, we have to be more strategic in our engagement with our peers and leadership teams. We always throw around the glib, hey, be a menu creator, not an order taker, right? And I think that's important. But back to then the blueprint, I think it gives us the opportunity, and in the book, right, I have frameworks that allow us to think through these things. But I think ultimately it gives us the opportunity to practice our authentic dialogue. My dad used to tell me all the time, solve the problem at the lowest level with the least number of people involved. And a lot of times I found with my HR colleagues, right, we don't bring things up privately with our C-suite peers to start to talk about the toxic relationships and things. Sometimes we bring it up in a public venue thinking maybe that's going to be a safer place for us. But ultimately, I think we have to go about this strategically. And much like
Yes.
we just talked about in the last question, I think we have to be able to analyze all facets of the HR game from recruitment to grave of our employees and ask ourselves where are the toxic pieces, then map out what we could introduce to be able to detoxify those different pieces, which is what we do with an analysis from our assessment. Then I think we have to be able to do that scary thing, which is advocate for policies and programs that may or may not be welcomed by the C-suite, but we know are going to deliver the better results and change the toxic environment. You can't walk into a room of 99 toxic leaders and think tomorrow it's going to change. But at the same time, there's probably 20 of those individuals in there that really want it to be changed and they don't know how. And it may
Mhm.
take 99 conversations to find those 20. But if you truly want to create the culture, then you have to do that hard work and practice. And I'll even say before that, it starts with us, right? What
Yes.
are what are our guiding principles? Ultimately, what do we stand for when nobody's watching? What do we want to be known for in our legacy going forward? And ultimately, how much do we value an organization that can create the outcome? If what we're doing is just staying around because it's the job, then I would say you probably need to do a little bit more inner clarity work to find out what it is that's driving who you are, because a job is a job is a job, and I wouldn't do just about anything for a job, but I think there are people out there who use that as the excuse.
I think learning about yourself and getting in touch with who you are and what matters to you is not just for leaders, it's for all of us. I mean,
Right.
I hate to break it to you, but we're only on this earth but a finite time.
And we don't know our expiration date, right? I
We
mean,
don't.
and that's the thing. And I think you're nailing it. At least maybe it's the urgency as I've gotten old, right? In the sense that I want to make sure that I align who I want to be with what I do on a daily basis,
Yes.
and that doesn't happen someday. It happens today, and I have to decide when and where I'm going to start that. So I don't think you can walk into that room of 99 toxic leaders and say everybody in here is wrong and you have to change. But
Right.
I do think that we can help illuminate individuals to processes, procedures, practices, and programs that can change the environment without trying to hold on to the past.
We're discussing this, I'm thinking one of the biggest skills I think that HR and talent development needs right now is influencing skills.
I think there's something
Influencing
to that, right?
skills.
I think that what a lot of us got to our position in HR by being the person who can create the answer and put into play the solution that the C-suite wants that won't get in the way of other people, right? And and honestly, that's not what we're here
No.
for as leaders. So I think the tricky part is and I say it all the time, Teresa, and you just said, the identity works for everyone. Everyone's a leader. It's a leader of self
Yes.
first and
Oh,
foremost,
high
right?
five. Preach.
And we sometimes defer, like, well, I'm not a leader. I'm not responsible for that. That's not my world. Yes, it is. You're the leader of
Yes.
yourself, and you decide how much you're showing up every single day. And I think that's part of the importance of this practice, right? I'm a piano player, and before I start playing jazz standards or pop music, I force myself to do some technique work, just 2 pages usually. One of the books is like piano exercises for dummies, right? And and so I force myself to do that. What I find, Teresa, is that when I move from the practice to actually playing, my playing is better. If I just sit down and start playing the piano, my playing is a little bit clunky. Practice is critical, not just for piano playing, but practice is critical for all leadership. And we stop practicing once we get the title. It's crazy.
This goes back to the discipline
Yep.
aspect, which I can't help but think you picked that up at West Point.
Maybe a little bit.
Little bit, little
Maybe.
bit.
Yeah.
What did you pick up from? Because I was thinking about this the other day for myself. Our Wharton CHRO program, it was a year-long program. We went through everything you could think about in terms of strategy for HR. Then we had our 3 electives that we went through as well, and then we did our capstone.
Yeah.
What's your takeaway, and how did that shape your thinking, or did it shape your thinking?
Absolutely. I mean, any chance you get to interact with, I mean, our cohort was pretty awesome, Teresa, I have
It
to admit, right? I
it
mean,
was. We were very lucky.
yeah, I think we were really lucky with the diversity of the roles and just I'll call it the human centric focused partners that we were working with. But um, I think Wharton got 3 things right, right? I think that the first thing it got right for me is it brought real problems into real time, right? So everybody was able to bring their actual CHRO challenges into the classrooms, and
Yes.
even though we had case studies from 2015 and from other areas, we were actually navigating real time topics. So I think that they really got that one right. I mentioned it already too, but I think that the cohort model is right. I think small groups build peer relationships, and those relationships can outlast programs, right? That's where
Yes.
transformation really happened. I've had calls and interactions with some of our classmates. The lectures weren't necessarily weren't didn't give us that chance for engagement, but I've had individuals from literally all over the world, from our class and from other CHRO cohorts, that have interacted with me, and it gives us, I'll call it, that important perspective that's not ours. So I think that the cohort
Yes.
model was a really good one and influenced me and actually helped me decide to use cohorts in the authentic leader certification as well. Then I think the capstone project, Teresa, and you mentioned it just a second
Oh,
ago. I
it's
mean, it was fantastic. I had to
yes.
apply the frameworks. I mean, it was kind of awesome, and maybe that's where I got the idea of frameworks in my book. But you have to apply the frameworks to your organization, anticipate the outcome. That's not theoretical. That's really live. And when the
Yes.
faculty can help coach you and give you feedback from their real world experiences, I think that was awesome, and I think the Wharton program also exposed where a lot of us struggle as in CHRO communities as well as that when we talked about it a second ago, which is we're packing yesterday's insights into tomorrow's problems. And the program, claims it's continuously reviewed and updated, but by the time that they package the leadership offerings and they scale it, get it approved and things like that, the dynamics of the workforce have changed a little bit, right? So I think
Mhm.
that the best CHROs I know from Wharton are experimenters, right? They're the individuals not waiting for the curriculum to catch up,
Right.
right? They're piloting authentic based programs before they're proven. They're redesigning interview processes. They're willing to be wrong in the service of learning faster. And I think that's what I learned and took away from the CHRO program at Wharton. It's you have to that it's a challenge to stay on the edge, But if you focus on staying on the edge and executing, then you can get there because the workforce doesn't wait for HR to catch up.
No.
Stay curious, stay rigorous, stay real, and move faster than your own programs.
Yeah. Well, if that wasn't an advertisement for the program, no, it clearly the biggest thing I took from that experience was people. I
Yep,
mean, the fact that I have a friendship with you, and at any time I can reach out and say, David, what are your thoughts on this? And when you publish your book, I can support you, and like that I think was the biggest thing.
I
But
agree.
certainly the sharing and the problem solving together, and even like the life experience stuff. We had one of our colleagues who had a stroke,
Yep,
and like we were with her through that whole recovery process. So there's something to be said for education of any kind. It doesn't have to be a warden, but education
right.
of any kind where you get people together and they stay in touch and they help each other.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
So I'm going to put you on the spot because we're talking about
Oh,
masks, and I've been thinking about this question myself. What's a leadership mask you personally had to take off? And tell us about that.
yeah. One of the things I've learned since actually starting this manuscript, and one of the things I have to remind myself of is that you have to be transparent. You have to be vulnerable. You can't let performance slide in. So I'm saying that out loud because as you asked the question, I'm like, well, do I answer this honestly? Yeah, and the answer is yes, I do. I think that the mask I had to take off, Teresa, is intellect and hard work, right? For years, those two things were my armor, right? I talked about
Mhm.
navigating rooms that weren't built for me. And I learned early on that in most cases, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're safe. If you have the answer, they can't dismiss me. So I would race out in front all the time, always, every meeting, every project, every conversation. I would dig deep and research faster than anybody could do it. I knew all the research ins and outs. And then I became responsible for developing other leaders. And I realized my team didn't need me to have all the answers. They needed space themselves to become experts. So, as uncomfortable and as vulnerably exposing as it became, I had to take the mask off because it felt like I was limiting people. Um, and I didn't want to do that, right? I had to practice and learn this thing called I don't know,
Oh, wow.
which was more vulnerable than I think I'd ever been because I'd spent literally decades avoiding that. So I think that what I discovered is I don't know, and then follow that up with who has insight here, created more trust, more development, and more growth than, well, I know the answer. Listen to me tell you what the answer is, ever did.
Right.
It gave my team permission to lead from their own strengths, and it showed them that I valued the expertise of them more than my ego. It built the thing that performance never could, which was actual collaboration. So the mask I had to take off was intellect as proof I belonged. You know,
Wow.
the capacity I had to build was being okay with not being the smartest person in the room and trusting that my value isn't only in knowing and creating solutions, but it's as valuable or more valuable to create space for others. So I think that's the hardest work that I did. And I'll be honest, Teresa, that's still the hardest work I'm doing.
Yeah, because it's you lean on that. It's a comfort for you to lean on that, to go back to the comfort, but you recognize there's better outcomes.
Right.
Maybe not, it's funny because it's not a spreadsheetable thing, right? And that's where we get stuck because
That's
it's like,
right.
well, how can you like pull this up on a PowerPoint slide? But
Right.
you know it when it's there. It's an energy.
Yeah.
It's and you just see it in the day-to-day work and how people think of themselves. That was huge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got the wheels turning there because I got
Okay, good.
some folks I'm working with who also use intellect
Yeah. Yeah.
as a mask, and they are smart,
Yep,
just like
that's
you
not.
are. You're very, very smart.
Well, thank you. But again, when you use it as a mask or when you use it as armor, it doesn't let people see who you truly are. And I mentioned it a couple times. The more authentic I became, the more successful became. Um, but part of the success was measured by my own measures versus someone else's.
What are things authentic leaders do consistently that performative leaders almost never do?
Well, again, the research, one of the things that the research says is, and I call it just closing the loop, right? And they close the loop publicly. Authentic leaders close the loop publicly, even when they can't deliver what was promised. Performative leaders make commitments, they fail to deliver, and then they hope that nobody notices that they didn't,
Oh,
or they spin it and
wow.
say, "Oh, priority shifted," right? Where an authentic leader will say, "Hey, I told you that we'd have this done by Friday. We didn't deliver. Here's what happened. Here's what I've learned. Here's what I think we should do differently. Who has input on this?" See, that's trust built transparency. You say what you're going to
Yes.
do. You do what you say. When you can't, you acknowledge it publicly and you extract a lesson from it. I think that most leaders think that transparency means we share when we win. No, real transparency means acknowledging the failures and doing it
Yes.
visibly so that the team can honestly learn or can learn that honesty is appreciated and safe here. And I think that one behavior to close the loop
Yes.
publicly can change everything.
My God. You know what I think of when you talk about that is engagement surveys, right?
Right.
So
Absolutely.
and like they're doing an engagement survey, which is good,
It's
right?
good. It's good
We're
data.
gathering opinions.
Yeah.
But closing the loop on that is here's what you said.
Yep.
Let's talk about
That's
that.
right. Here's what we heard. Here's what we think we can do. What is your
Yes.
feedback on what we should be doing
Yeah.
differently? And that collaboration, Teresa, again, that's what keeps the organizational citizenry behavior, right? That discretionary effort. It keeps it high
Yes.
when you're able to do that. And without that, I think that's why we're seeing productivity going down. We're seeing retention going down. We're seeing trust going down. We're seeing all the aspects of the quantum workforce era moving in the wrong direction for us. So we just increase prices and make the consumer pay more because we can't be as efficient. And I don't think that's a model that works either.
No. No. Oh my goodness. What about somebody who has a team of 10? They're
Well,
not like a big executive
sure.
with, a department. Team of 10. What advice do we have for them? Where can they start?
I think again, it starts with, I'll call it three questions, one action, right? Start with the inner clarity, which is in chapter two, the one question. The first question would be, who am I when nobody's watching? And what I would encourage people to do, and I have a pencil in my hand, a Dixon Ticonderoga, but my favorite pencil in the world, right? But I'd encourage people to write it down. Don't type it, literally write it. Slow it down a little bit, be honest and not impressive. Then your second question, and what I want you to ask is, what work energizes me versus drains me? Now you need two lists there, but you have to write them both down, right? And then I think the third question before the promised action is what values are non-negotiable, right? And this is something that you can do with your team as well. These are all exercises and practices that deliver collaboration and coherence with your team. Those three questions will take you probably 20 minutes. And I know nobody really has 20 minutes, but I'd say carve that time out, do it this week. Then be courageous, be authentic, share one of those one of those questions with your team. So, for example, for me, it would be like, I realize transparency is a core value for me. I'm going to start explaining decisions more clearly. If you don't understand why we're doing something, ask me directly and I'll answer honestly. That I've had to do that because I used to move so fast that I wouldn't hear questions and I wouldn't think. Then you have to follow through every time. See, your team is going to watch for that gap between what you say and what you do. Once you start that inner identity work and you start building trust, built transparency, your team's going to follow suit on that. So the answer for me is simple, right? Go to chapter two. There's some great questions in there. There's a pirate inventory in there, which I think is kind of fun in that chapter that asks you to think about some of these same types of questions. But you don't need a Fortune 500 budget. You simply need 20 minutes, 20
Yes.
minutes of honesty and discipline to get this whole thing started.
I love that. And you know I'm going to do that.
I
I'm
hope
going to
so.
do that. You know, oh, well, because I'm a geek with this stuff and I love it.
I am
And I
too.
love the simplicity of it. And I will let you know how it goes.
I love that.
What's a question I didn't ask you that you wish I had asked?
You know, I think one of the things that I try to be transparent with, and I guess it's the follow up to the more authentic I became, the more successful I became. I think it's really around, David, what does it cost you personally to do this authenticity work? Because I think everyone's
Mm,
afraid of the risk, right? There's a risk in showing up to yourself, right? And and I'd say that the work I'm doing now, Teresa, requires me to stay exposed. I can't teach authentic leadership while I'm not while I'm performing invulnerability. I can't ask others to take off their mask while keeping mine on. So every workshop, every keynote, every podcast, right? I have to stop myself from filtering myself and I have to show up as myself, not a polished version.
right.
Not everybody's going to love me. Sometimes I'm called an acquired taste. I'm not going to show up with the impressive version. I'm going to show up real. And some days it feels liberating. Other days it feels terrifying.
Hmm.
And the follow up to then the more successful I became as an authentic person really is the lonelier I got for a while. You see everything from foster care to the platform of the New York Stock Exchange, a whole nother story, right? Authenticity didn't limit me, Teresa, it launched me. But it also changed my audience. Some rooms that fit the
Mm.
costume don't fit the person underneath it. Some relationships that worked while I was performing a version of myself,
Yes.
when that gap closed, they didn't survive. Authenticity doesn't change just your leadership, it changes who stays. The people who were drawn to the performance, they leave. And for a while, before you find your people, your tribe, it's lonely. That's the cost that nobody really talks about. Not vulnerability, not the exposure, the loneliness that comes when you realize the rooms I fit into before were those are performance rooms. But the
Right.
ones I lost, if I'm being honest, as my mom would say, they weren't the right rooms anyway. And the people who stayed, they're really my people. They're really my tribe. So the cost is I don't get to hide anymore. I have to live with this work publicly with all the vulnerability and the loneliness that it requires. And honestly, that's exactly the cost authentic leadership requires from everyone. And I've never been happier.
Oh my God. Well, that puts a bow on the package right there. So, what's next for you? I know you've got a tour. I'm going to try and get to New York.
I hope
So,
so.
what's next for you? What's going on?
Yeah, we're middle of an 11 city tour. Atlanta was just yesterday. I was talking about it a little bit. So shout out to all my authentic leaders in Atlanta, right? We're hitting Scottsdale next Wednesday. The following week, Houston, Dallas, Chicago, DC, New York, San Francisco, Seattle. And on June 2nd, we have the national book launch. I mean, you can get the book now on piratejokesarentfunny.com, but the national retail launch is June 2nd. And we have a big event in Minneapolis on that day. What's next? Like I mentioned, the Authentic Leader Certification launches the next cohort in June. And beyond that, Teresa, there's the book. There it is. I love it. Beyond that, I'm supporting 1 million leaders to lead more authentically. That's my mission. So I'm building the infrastructure. I have it available for people who want to partner with me, the assessments, the certification, the peer cohort model. And honestly, I want to partner with organizations that are serious about leadership development, not as a value on the wall, but true authenticity as the foundation for how they develop leaders. I really want to partner with those organizations. And I guess the last thing for me is just staying honest in my own work, right? Because I have to make sure that I'm not performing, that I'm living. Because if I start performing, this whole thing collapses. And I've said it to you before, right? For me, it's keep building, keep showing up, keep doing the work because authentic leadership isn't something that you get. It's a
No.
discipline and a daily practice that allows you to keep growing. And honestly, that's what I have to keep living for.
Oh my gosh. I have loved this conversation so
You're
much.
so kind.
I have loved this so much. I don't want it to end, but I know people have things to do and you have things to do. We will have a little after party. So if anybody wants to stay for the after party, we do have that. But at this point, I just want to thank you for sharing your wisdom and
Thank you.
thought leadership and stories and you sharing
Thank you.
you.
Thank you,
authentically
Teresa.
you.
You're wonderful. I value our friendship, and I certainly value the work that you do. I'm really looking forward to helping other leaders become more authentic.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to stop recording. We got that. Oh, look at you. I think, Lysandra, here we go. I got it. I got it.